Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. El-Bayoumi from the Rodham Institute. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. El-Bayoumi from the Rodham Institute. I am delighted to be your host this evening once again. As you remember, the Rodham Institute is dedicated to improving health equity here in Washington, D.C. This has been a trying time. I say that we're living between two pandemics right now. The long-standing pandemic of racism, which has had just to use a medical term, an acute exacerbation, and of course, the COVID pandemic. They're both equally deadly. They're both equally affecting our spirits, our souls, and our physical lives. And we have assembled here today just a wonderful panel to talk a little bit more about how we can stay mentally fit and healthy during such a challenging time. Now I'm going to ask my assistant to put up the PowerPoints, if she can, behind the scenes. And while she's doing that, there we go. The Rodham Impact speaker series was actually something that we started way before the pandemic. But of course, because of COVID and we had to be physically distant, we decided to do that virtually. We had no choice. We're going to go back a couple of slides, if we can, just to the very beginning. Thank you. As with all of these speaker series, I always like to just start off with giving you a very brief state of COVID-19 here in the District of Columbia. Because we've been following the science, because we have been lucky in that our Mayor Muriel Bowser believes in science, we've had no deaths from COVID here in the Washington, D.C., city of Washington, D.C. for the past 4 days. So we are making some progress, but obviously we cannot become complacent because we know that some places which were doing okay have had second waves. And I like to tell and remind people that there are people that are dying not from COVID, but for the fear of catching COVID. We've seen about 30% increase in the number of deaths that are not COVID related because people have not gone to the doctor, not going to the emergency department when they think that they may be having a heart attack or a stroke, for example. There have, I believe, been about 558 souls that have died during COVID since this all began. So with that, we thought that this is such an important topic to talk about, and that is mental resilience. How do you care for yourself while you're caring for each other and for others? And our esteemed panel, who you're going to hear about in just a minute, are here to discuss that with us today. Next slide, please. Next slide. We're here to partner together to improve the health and well-being of all of DC. You know, there have been lots of slogans that have been put out about criminal justice, about health, about Black Lives Matter. We look at this at the Rodham Institute as one struggle. It's one struggle with many fronts. Economic justice equals legal justice, equals social justice, equals health equity. They are all linked. It's not just one solitary thing. I think sometimes in media, you see things being separated, but it's really one issue. Next paragraph, or next slide, please. Our three priority areas are youth education, programming, and workforce to bring more young people into all kinds of health careers, because we know that when Black and Brown people are in the healthcare careers, Black and Brown communities' health improves. We also believe that there's a lot of work to be done in educating everybody that works in the healthcare system about how to be more humane, to show cultural humility, and to take better care of all of our patients. And then finally, the community collaborations, which of course today is one example of how we partner with communities to serve them in what they would like for us to partner with them about. They are the priority, they choose the topics, and we are here as at their service. Next, please. Please visit our website and you can take a look at some of the resources. These are specific to DC and the DMV. Next slide, please. I just want to give a shout out to our wonderful staff that you see here, Miss Tracy Bass, Miss Christina Williams, and a special shout out to Miss Ashanti Carter, who's actually the one that's been putting these wonderful webinar series together and is in the middle of actually taking her exams for her PhD. So really special shout out. We want to really support her. Next. And finally, these are some ways that you can get involved, and we'll put these slides up at the very end as well. And finally, some more social media. And then finally, I want to introduce our guests. Our special thanks to Zaina, who's going to be starting medical school. Actually, I think she already started medical school in Detroit at Wayne State University. She was our intern. So without further ado, let's talk about our wonderful panelists. The High Reverend Dr. Jerryl Moody, he's the senior pastor at Israel Baptist Church, which is one of our partner institutions. The Ms. Geraldine or Geri Feaster, she is a retired nurse executive, and we had met in person before all of this began, Ms. Geri, and had some lovely sessions. And then, of course, Ms. Gale Bell, the Medical Center's Women's Veterans Program Manager. We are just so happy and delighted to have you all here. So let's get started. We have a lot to discuss, and I'm going to be doing the listing, and we're going to make sure that we have a chance to hear from each of you, but handle any questions from the audience. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with you, Ms. Bell. You are one of the nurses. We're lucky that we have two nurses here today. I always say that you are really the people that take care of patients. You are the angels on earth. You are closest to actually caring and serving patients. This is your life's work. What is special about COVID?
That in sum, it is no joke. Being a survivor myself, it is something that the population just need to take serious. Again, we're losing too many people unnecessarily because of lack of really understanding the impact that it is having on you as an individual, on us as a community. So COVID is nothing to play with, and everyone should take it very, very seriously.
Can you share a little bit, if you feel comfortable, what was your journey like with COVID?
I have a very unusual journey, and I am very happy to share because even retrospectively, I say I can't believe it happened to me, simply because my role is really 99.9% administrative. So thank you for your compliments and all that we do for nursing. Basically, as a program manager, I have a different role in ensuring that our women veterans do receive the care that they should in a area that is so predominantly male. But beyond that, one of my roles is to share that information to our new employees, which indeed I happen to have done in new employee orientation. But quite ironically, and in the mid-March area, when a lot of the information on the news was just coming into play in terms of what it is we should be doing regarding social distancing, the mask, et cetera, that was just coming out and really had not been implemented in our agency as such. But I just happened not to be feeling well. I'm a nurse of over 35 years, or so old school as I call myself. But the symptoms that I began to have, I treated as individual symptoms. I did not believe I could not have COVID simply because we were all taught, at that point, you were being infected by someone who had the disease. But needless to say, each one of my symptoms I had individually. What were my symptoms? just not feeling well. My tummy hurts, but I have a history of GI problems, so that was nothing out of the ordinary. But because there was so much caution regarding COVID, I just thought it best that I stay home and work from home. So I went in, I took off on that Monday. I went in Tuesday to get my computer and work that I knew I could get done in the comforts of my home office, only to come home and feel as though I had been hit over by a bulldozer. Um, Essentially, I had all the symptoms in terms of the temperature, elevated temperature, I also had a bad headache. It hurt so bad to even move my eyes. So I treated myself for the sinus infection. I had a tingling in my chest. I thought I was getting, I felt like fluid was building up. Maybe I was catching a cold. So I took Mucinex for my cold. So
Mm-hmm.
the visual symptom I
Mm-hmm.
took care of as an old nurse. When my sinuses started draining, seemed like my temperature started draining.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you could not, nor could I be convinced that any of my symptoms were COVID related. But most people ask me, well, why didn't you listen to the news? Simply because I was feeling too bad, feeling too sick, and all I wanted to do was sleep.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
wasn't listening to the TV, was
Mm-hmm.
barely talking to my family. And luckily,
Mm-hmm.
just by his grace, I am geographically separated from my husband. He lives in North Carolina waiting for my retirement, and then I'll move with him. But I happen to be home alone. Bittersweet, but it was better for me to, if you will, to tackle these symptoms. I'm not going to let this get in the way of me and my Lord that I know would take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very scary. It was very scary. Again, I was feeling weak. A cup of soup would last me all day long. But
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be strong for a family that was not here to go through
Mm-hmm.
this with me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
essentially, I just fought the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for me, I had been taking some vitamins. They did talk about taking a high dose of vitamin C, which I had been
Mm-hmm.
doing. So I felt my immune system help me tackle this. But again, mind you,
Right.
I didn't think I had COVID symptoms.
Wow.
When I felt like talking to people, that's all they could talk about. COVID,
Right.
you need to
Right.
be tested.
Right.
Quite ironically, though, when I went to my doctor, convincing him was yet another.
Wow. Right. Right.
So,
Well,
what did I
thank you
get?
so
The
much.
antibiotics,
Yeah, I know.
the,
It's a
the
it's a
inhalers.
sto- it's a story that we've heard over and over again, especially to members of the communities of Black and Brown communities over and over again.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so Reverend Moody, I mean, you have a large congregation. If you could just tell us a little bit about your congregation and what it's been like for you and your congregation and you as a person too.
Well, it has definitely been a challenge for me. Sister Bell is trying to get to North Carolina from DC. I'm trying to get to DC from North Carolina.
Mm,
I was recently elected the pastor of Israel Baptist Church. And as soon as we got our feet in the door, the mayor imposed her stay-at-home orders. So we had to close the doors of the church. So it has kept us from getting to be together physically, but through technology, we're able to communicate virtually. We are communicating several times a week with conference calls. We are with uh, Facebook Live. We are on our church website. Any avenue that we can use to communicate with our parishioners, this is what we're using. As a matter of fact, it may sound strange, but in a strange way, COVID-19 has actually brought, I believe, the church a little bit closer together.
mhm.
Of course, being new to the DC area, I am aware of the high traffic in the area, but being able to communicate virtually, our people can be at home and are able to communicate. I'm hearing the stories of how our sermons are being watched by people in pajamas, and they are able to be right at home and not have to deal with the interstate traffic trying to get in and out of the city. it has been a strain. It has been a strain because we are traditionalists. We are accustomed to being in the church on Sunday mornings and not being able to be there. It has put a strain on us because we're used to being around other people. And I think the isolation piece is one of the biggest pieces that we're facing. People are separated. They are not able to get back together. Now, the issue that we're dealing with, of course, we're hearing that the numbers are getting better and the word reopening is happening. But there's a fear still with the people. Is it really safe to go out? Is it really safe to come back together? So as a pastor, I have to take in the CDC, what the recommendations, what the mayor is saying, but also listen to the congregation and listen to them and see when they are ready to come back. I've already expressed that we are not going to force them to come back prematurely. We're going to wait until everyone feels safe that we can come back together. So it has changed the dynamics of church, but it has also improved the relationship of church.
There is something like this type of a crisis to bring things into sharper view in terms of priorities.
Yes.
I just hope that this is something, the silver lining, as you're describing, Pastor, of what we're learning is something that we can, sort of keep that lesson and not forget it, because we learn it and then relearn it and then forget it. But I think our very survival as people of color, but also as human beings to a large extent, really it turns about being able to get through this, because I believe that we're at a crisis point, certainly spiritually and morally these days. It is frightening.
The crisis state. We are at a crisis stage, and because now with not only dealing with COVID-19, but you're dealing with the social issues that have come up and in some places have actually taken over. And actually, COVID-19 has formed social issues. We hear about the racial issues, but we're hearing about people saying that the wearing of masks violates their constitutional rights and these things. This is another thing that's evolving from COVID-19. So it's not just the physical sickness, it is also a social issue that has sparked and somewhat married with the racial divide.
Yes, not to mention the mental health part. Ms. Geri, you're active in your ministry, you're a retired nurse, and nurses have a much more holistic approach to caring for patients. What have you noticed in sort of the congregation or among your family or friends about the toll that COVID is taking on a mental or emotional or psychological level?
Well, hopefully, what has happened, we do communicate with each other on the phone, but at the beginning of the year, the goal for the health ministry was to focus on living your best life, which included good relationships with family, friends, talk to people, call them up, and especially people who live alone. And I do know some of that is going on now. Not with our deacon ministry, the health ministry, and other ministries. We reach out and make sure that people are doing what they can. The other thing that we talked about was looking for things that would nourish your mind. Being isolated is bad, but it also gives us the time to reflect on where we are and what we need to do and what we can actually do. And I know for me, there are several prayer groups throughout the church, and some of us meet daily. We share scripture, we share situations within families if it's appropriate, but there is that connection. And the one thing I can say about our church is that we are a very family-oriented, loving church. So that will get a lot of us over it. And with the framework of living your best life, and not only nurturing healthy relationships, but we talked about exercises and things that you can do when you are incapacitated, when you are not able to go out, but you can walk in your community. You can also pay attention to your nutrition. And those are things that we focus on each month, something different, but trying to get people to put their best foot forward. And I think we will be a lot better off if we do those things.
So can I ask you, what are the practices that you practice yourself to help, keep yourself as, first of all, as beautiful inside as out, with that beautiful smile and that beautiful spirit? How do you do it?
Well, I'm grateful to God every day for 78 years, and I just love where I am in my life. But I have a network of friends, and I have all ages. It's not uncommon to get a call in the morning, say, we're doing 5 miles this morning. So I'll walk my 5 miles. I work my garden. I call people. I try to eat right. My family is very caring about me, what I'm doing, and where I'm going, and why I'm going. But I do believe having a network of friends to keep you healthy. Of course, I do the prayer call. I'm connected to a lot of health organizations, such as Rodham Institute. And many times I'm invited to participate in various forums to look at where we are going with the health disparities. So my life is rich. Thanks to Rodham Institute, we actually did some food giveaways at Israel Baptist Church, and we will do some in the future. And it's those connections that I think we are in a good place that we can do the things that we do for our church members.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Geri. And Pastor, what are some of your individual practices? I mean, you're taking care of so many people. You're in a new role. You're in a new city, and then you get hit with COVID. That's a lot of adjustments to deal with all at once. How have you been personally taking care of yourself? What are your habits?
It has certainly been a great adjustment, but as Ms. Geri said, God blessed me to come into Israel Baptist Church, and they are family oriented. And I get calls from the members of the church all the time, just to check in to make sure we're okay. And I'm grateful for that. And we, my wife and I, we try to make sure that we are still doing what we need to do. As Ms. Geri said, I'm trying to eat right. I'm trying to eat right.
That can be a challenge sometimes.
and we're keeping busy because of the actual virtual programs that's going on at Israel. It keeps me busy. So there aren't too many nights that I don't have either a conference call or a virtual meeting to go through. And so I enjoy interacting with people. So this is right down my alley. So because I enjoy what I'm doing. So just being able to get to know the people, we're still knowing each other. We're still on our honeymoon, even though it's virtual, we're still on honeymoon. And so we'll continue to get to know each other. So, and it has given me time, a great time for myself for prayer, study, and meditation. So isolation has not always been bad, maybe for some, but not as bad for others. So I'm using my free time to do more reading, I do more studying and preparing, because COVID-19 has as a pastor, put me into a point that my sermons, my preaching, my teaching has to be relevant to the context that we're in. I know that there are some that follow certain series of preaching, but I've been taught that your preaching and your teaching should be able to help those who are listening in what we are dealing with. So my sermons and teaching now deal with social issues. They're dealing with depression. I think we did Bible study a few weeks ago, and we talked about depression. And so we're dealing with things that that the people are dealing with, because there's no need for me to preach a sermon that has no relevance to what's going on right now. So it actually has made me stronger in the word and making sure that we're doing what we need to do.
Thank you for sharing. Ms. Gale, what are your practices to stay sort of emotionally, mentally fit while you're taking care of others?
From a psychological standpoint, and which it does impact to a degree, just knowing that it wasn't my fault, what. And I think that, it wasn't my fault. And that's really, really important, because it does give you some isolation. But to your point, essentially just eating better, continuing on my vitamin regimen, and I'm walking the stairs at the hospital a little bit more than I had in the past, that endurance that I seem to lost in the process. And just keeping a positive framework. I think that is so, so important these days. With the social isolation and all, just, getting into my activities, looking for my future retirement, just a lot of things to keep my mind on all the positive other things that we have. And I too have ministries at my church that I participate in with the Zoom calls, etc.
Well, it strikes me that each of us are above a certain age. And so introspection, reading, we have, because we've lived a longer time than maybe some of the audience members, we have coping mechanisms that we may pull out to deal with this situation, and because we've dealt with them before. It is maybe easier for us to stay more homebound versus a young person who wants to go here, there, and everywhere. That's natural. So what have you noticed, Pastor, well, to everybody really, not just to one individual, what have you noticed? Are there particular challenges for your parishioners or your family or friends based on age? Because I think sometimes our seniors tend to become a little bit more isolated, and then young people might, see this whole thing as, well, what, that's not me. I'm not going to be impacted. Just, let me live my life. This is the summertime. I want to hang out with my friends. What are you seeing in terms of family, friends, and community in terms of handling, if you will, special populations?
Again, and our senior members, they are the cautious members. When COVID-19, the news of COVID-19 first started to rise, the news, the media put out that this would more affect the seniors than the younger generation. So our seniors have put themselves in a place where they are more careful. The summertime is upon us, and the younger people in the areas, they are tired of being isolated. They're tired of being at home. They want to get out. When you have high school students saying, I'm ready to go back to school, that they are ready to get out. They can't handle being isolated. That's one thing is because of, again, the generation that we're living in and the technology that we have. Our younger generation now has been exposed to a whole lot more things than we have. Some of the older congregations, we are used to being at home,
right?
Not much to do. So it hasn't affected us in such a negative way as it has the younger generation. All of us want to be careful, but and as a pastor, I try to express it that COVID-19 is real. I think Ms. Gale, I think you said it at the beginning. It's real. It's not just a senior person's virus. It's not just a certain people virus. It affects everyone. So the difficulty is trying to get those who feel like I'm super because of my age, so I can withstand it. I'm trying to get them to understand that they have to be careful as well.
Absolutely. And might I add, in terms of not only it being real, you just don't know who might be a carrier. In my case, due to contact tracing, they were able to trace my source to someone in new employee orientation. I was given a presentation. I'm interactive. I grabbed somebody from the audience to prove a point. Who would know? And therefore, that was the impetus of me not thinking that I had COVID. I couldn't. But you cannot be too careful, and you cannot assume. Just like when I'm talking to my neighbors and we're laughing and having a good time, trust and believe. We have our mask on, we're 6 feet apart. We love each other, but cannot be too careful.
Yes.
And
Miss Geri?
that's one of the things that we're looking at when we do come back to church, is all the precautions we need to do. In addition to being responsible for the health ministry as a leader, I also serve as a trustee. So we've gone through the cleaning. We have a schedule. We have the face mask. We have the distance signs. We have all that in preparation for when they come back. But in addition, we have a child development center that's part of our facility. So that board is working hard on preparing stuff when they return. So it's been a big part of my life. I mean, I do go out, but I'm cautious. Like when we had the food giveaways, you know, I wore my mask, I wore my gloves. We had good flow of people, you know, taking every precaution that you can. But I must admit, I've gone to help do some screening at one of the sites here at the health department. I've gotten screened myself. So I do live a fairly robust life in spite of it,
Mhm.
but I do take it seriously. And I know that we're
Mhm.
all vulnerable, even though we do all we can with the vitamins and everything else.
Mhm. I want to pivot a little bit to talk about the larger pandemic that I mentioned at the very outset of the introduction, and that's the racism pandemic. 84% of people who have died in Washington, D.C. are actually African Americans. We know that upwards of 30% of all deaths have actually nationwide have happened in African American and Latino communities, which feels to me, I think a lot of people, a lot of us have taken it that, well, there's no interest, right? If it's the elderly, the people with pre-existing conditions, if it's Black and brown communities, well, who cares, right? There's always been racism. It's baked into the roots of the foundation of this country. But obviously with this administration, there has been just open season, right? There's been a type of license that has been given to say and do anything, and to behave in any way. How do you think sort of the two pandemics coming together has impacted people's emotional, social, and physical health? Because I'll just say in my practice, a lot of PTSD, a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's like, here we go again. It's just the latest. And what I say about COVID from a health disparity standpoint, this is just the latest example, right? This is no different than any other example that we have in terms of health. So I'd love to hear, you know, your insights and comments on that. Ms. Jerry?
Well, first of all, I think the comments about the health disparities, we've known about them forever. And to all of a sudden the light bulb goes on, you know, that more Black people or brown people are getting sicker and dying, but the health care has never been on par. So that was not surprising to me. I think if it's going to force us to look at that with a critical eye and do something about it. I don't know how many different initiatives I've been involved in with addressing the health disparities. Uh, I don't know how much progress we've made. I'm on a group with literacy within the church, several churches around the district, trying to get patients or members to be more engaged with their health care. And I think that's a big factor too. We as individuals need to take more responsibility for our own health care, but it's bigger than that. So I think the Black Lives Matter is real. I think the pandemic is real, but if we can benefit from the two coming full force, we will be in a better place. And I do think we are seeing some changes on the positive side, but there's so much stuff on the backside that's rolling down. It's almost hard to get away from all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations, the mistreatment, the acceptance of all the mean spirited stuff that we see. And that's the challenge. We've got them both.
The humiliation and the threats. I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but when the administration says if you don't go back to school, we're going to cut funding to schools. Did you know that most of the funding to various states, 90% actually comes from the states, you know, to schools. But it's the Title I schools that get the federal funding. So who is that going to disproportionately impact? It's going to impact kids of color, kids in need. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, I'd love to hear your other people's points of view on this.
Like Ms. Jerry said, the lack of help as far as medical for people of color, we've known that has always existed.
Mhm.
but COVID-19 has again put a spotlight upon that. And to also have the government leadership saying that they're going to cut off funds. Again, this is again an attack on people of color. It's strange that this forcefulness would come about and not realizing who will this actually affect. And so now to see who will actually be affected. Right now in North Carolina, our schools are already behind. We can't get the books we need. They don't have the money to afford computers. So that our children are already behind. So when you threaten to put, it's either your health or finances, you have to juxtapose the two. Which one will you do? I think before we went online, North Carolina came on, the governor of North Carolina came on, and he's requiring, school will open, and he was requiring that all staff and students will have to wear face masks. But you're also given an option to virtual learning. So you're jeopardizing health. So I think it goes back to what Ms. Geri was saying. We know that through our medical, what we've received medically has already been disproportionate. So now with education, when we are forced to go back to school, to me, the numbers will go up. So again, the people of color, the numbers of sicknesses and death are going to rise. So we need to just sit back and say, hey, common sense has to prevail sooner or later.
Well, and then for our audience, I'm sure you're already aware of this, but just to remind our audience, actually 80% of all health outcomes are not related to seeing the doctor. They are related to your education, the food that you eat, where you live, the air that you breathe, the water that you drink, all the economic health of your neighborhood, to name a few. So we, from our lens at the Rodham Institute, we're very concerned about the education of children, especially in Ward 7 and 8. And just to give you a statistic, in Ward 8, the high school graduation rate is 42%. If I, as a doctor, did nothing else but got kids to graduate from high school, I would add 10 years of life. It's just that simple. And the concern is, yes, for those of us that have the technology, right? Computers, smartphones, or internet, to your point, Pastor Moody, that people are making decisions, food versus education, food versus internet. What happens to the people who don't have access, right, to these things? You're actually, the digital divide just is increasing and increasing. So this is it's actually more than a double whammy, because we know what's happening to food. We know that the other things like community, being together, all these things are really putting even greater pressure on a really broken system.
Yes.
So what can we at Rodham do, and what can we do together to address these issues in real time? Because it's great to talk about policy, it's great to talk about, laws and all that, but we are very action oriented. What can we do now to support, your congregation, to support the good people that you serve, that you work with, and to support our community?
I think one of the challenges for us in any of the groups that I work with, the church is a wonderful institution, and supposedly people trust the church and what we do. But there's a large percent of the population who don't go to church. Reaching those people, and those are the ones who I feel are suffering. We can pick up and help people in the church that's suffering if we know about it. But what if you don't have a church home? And how do you reach that segment of the population? And that's the big question.
One of the things that I'm looking forward to when we're able to get back into the city and get back into the church is to take Israel beyond the walls, beyond 1251 Saratoga Avenue. I want to make sure, because again, our Great Commission is to go out, serve outwardly. And yes, it's good to provide for those that are in the church. But like Ms. Geri said, most of the people who are in need are the people outside of the church. And you will see that I'm a person that believes in helping people. And so we have to go outside. We have to go, those people that are hungry. This is the nation's capital. This is supposed to be the most powerful nation in the world. But yet you ride through the city of DC and there are people sleeping under bridges. There are homeless. There are people who don't know how they're going to eat. There are children who are starving. So we have to go out and to work with people like the Rodham Institute and work with other churches, other pastors, other civic organizations to come together. We're going to have to team up and work together and go out and fight this monster that we're having to deal with.
And then there's the issue of how are we going to bring healthcare, or can we bring healthcare into the community? I think this pandemic has really opened the eyes to many, many people who, because of health disparities, have not really followed up on their healthcare issues as they should. But now I've educated this lady, this family, on the importance of getting your blood pressure checked, your glucose check, et cetera, et cetera. But now I can't go to the hospital because of COVID. Now I really can't make a doctor's appointment because, it's not an emergency. So it's almost like the pandemic it's just so huge. You just don't know which way to turn. So from a health perspective, it's like, how can we now go to a community where the community just now can't come for healthcare as they should?
Well, so here's a proposal for you. We've been talking last week. We actually had a webinar on COVID and education, and we had a teacher from Coolidge High School, which is one of our partner schools. As you know, it's a historically Black high school, which was like one of the elite high schools, certainly back in the day. It's located in Ward 4, but over 50% of the kids actually come from Ward 7 and 8. And we also had a student. And so what we've decided to do, and we're going to be partnering, and we hope that you can be one of our partners, we decided that back to school time, whenever that happens, and we can start now, it doesn't really matter, we will do a drive so that kids can get book supplies, or school supplies, I'm sorry, food and testing, because we do have mobile units now that can actually come into the community. I think that our healthcare system has been really backwards. I mean, how do you ask the people who are the sickest to travel the longest? It should be the other way, right? The old school of having people either go to the homes or to places that are more convenient, right? So for us to really look at these other models that interestingly have been very successful in other parts of the world, to be able to do that. So we will after this call is over, would love to talk to you and bring you along with some of the other partners in these discussions, and to also find out what the needs are. We actually have been partnering with our cardiology section, and they've been giving out blood pressure cuffs. And so my view of churches and other, we have 6 anchor institutions. I should just back up and tell you. Israel Baptist is one of them. Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church is a second. Temple Praise is a third. UDC on MLK is one, because a lot of people go there, a lot of young people. It's closed, but the space is a very central location. United Medical Center, even though it's a hospital, they actually lack a lot of resources, right, for the people that work there and also attend or seek care there. And then Southeast Tennyson Learning Center, right? So if those are the places that are kind of the hubs that people know on such and such day, or that there are these activities that are happening, even if they're not members of the church, that can be sort of a safe space, a place that, because you are always going to be there. Any program may come and go, but to be able to bring people into a structure or to an institution, faith-based or not, that's obviously a very individual decision, I believe is the way that we can really begin to build community or rebuild community. Let's be real, clear about that. Communities have been dismantled. There was a time, and Ms. Geri, you can speak to this, when people, doctors and lawyers and nurses and everybody were living within the community. What's happened now is artificial. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I know for us, and I want to hear more about what you're proposing, because annually we partnered with Unity Health and had a huge health fair, and it was open to the community. And we would give away over 300 backpacks loaded with everything they needed. The congregation supported that, and a lot of the institutions throughout the city, through Unity Health and through our relationships, we had plenty of supplies. That was a one-time thing.
Exactly.
And I'd love to be able to have more supplies and stuff available on an ongoing basis, but we haven't had the opportunity to do that but once a year.
Well, it cannot be one and done. That's been the whole problem, because people who participate in the one and done, they feel good about themselves. Oh, they're doing something in the community, and then it's goodbye. No. Done. I mean, this first of all, it's a right for people to have these things. We are just trying to right size this situation. What else do people think? Is Bell, Pastor?
I was agreeing with Miss Jerry that, I'm just listening to the history of the things Israel has been doing. But again, as you're saying, we can't do this one time of year and then let it go. So it's going to have to be a continuative effort. And we're going to, once we ever get back together, we're certainly going to meet with our health ministry and find ways to continue to help our community. My goal is to make Israel a community church. We want to be open not just to a certain genre of people, but to the community, so that we're going to be doing things, because again, a lot of children, I've found out that once schools are closed, they're, as far as what they're going to eat, they don't know where they're going to get it from. So we need to provide not only books and school supplies and food. Wintertime is coming. These children are going to need coats and they're going to need food. So we need, as a church, we need to go and do whatever we can. And again, partner with other entities, making sure that we can do all we can do.
Yeah. Pastor, since you're new to the DC area, one of the things about DC that a lot of people don't realize, there are actually a lot of social services. The problem is that people don't know how to access them. So one of the things that I always tell people to do, if they have a smartphone or if they have a computer, is to go to Aunt Bertha. Aunt Bertha is an app, and it has all the free services. It's actually a nationwide app, and that you put in your zip code and you can find out where you can get free housing, free food, legal help, all kinds of things, childcare, emergency transportation. There are also some programs. I love Food and Friends, which is just an incredible organization. They actually have meal delivery, and delicious meals for people who have medical issues. So people are dealing with cancer, with diabetes, with a whole host of issues, but they don't only give it to the individual, they give it to the family.
Ooh.
So let's say that somebody's got kidney disease and they are a vegetarian, they will create a menu for that. And I've tasted the food, it is fantastic. They now have something called Bright Start, which is for newly pregnant women. And so they can get that. So there are lots of services, and maybe we can do another webinar to get some of the people from these different agencies to talk about their programs. We've got a lot of them on our website, so you can refer to that. But there's a lot that's going on. There's a Capital Area Food Bank. Miss Jerry, you were going to say?
Yeah, we participate with the Capital Area Food Bank. We've had hot meals in Israel. The thing that happens with that, and marketing is probably key, but we didn't get as many people as we thought that would come at 5 p.m. for dinner. We tried that for several months. And Aunt Bertha, I've used that for years, trying to help people find resources. A group of us had worked through Aunt Bertha before it became really popular to refer people to different places. So I'm very familiar with that, and it's an excellent opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's art, and one has to be creative. It's not a one size fits all. Just
Right.
like when we're looking at when people can get seen for, let's say, health services, it doesn't make sense to have them during the day if everybody's at work, right? I mean, you
Absolutely.
have to adjust, and that's why, knowing what people need is so key. Are there other services or other things that we can do right now? Are there other needs that you feel are not being met that could help the social, psychological, emotional, and physical well-being of people that congregants, others?
Dr. Gigi, I'd just like to add into the panelists, and of course, Miss Feaster is intimately aware of, is just identifying the veterans that are out there who are eligible for health care at the VA. Certainly, we have these services of, social services, mental health that plays a very big part available right there. And I have found out that there is still that untapped population who's not aware of their eligibility for these services. So if you do identify them, indeed, send them to the VA. Let us assist them. There are a host of services and programs that they very well could be eligible for.
Yeah. Pastor, in your, before you came to DC, whether physically or virtually, what kind of a setting were you working in? Was it an urban or sort of city, medium, rural?
We were in more of even though the church was located in the city, a small city in northeastern North Carolina, it was still more rural. And we still had some of the same issues that we're dealing with in DC. It's just the issues that we were dealing with at a smaller scale than what we're having to do in DC. There were still children who were not given proper meals, didn't have what they needed to go to school. One of the things my wife and I formed was the JV Moody outreach program. And we worked to help these people by buying food, helping them with food, helping them get jobs, helping people get driver's license, instead of a driver's license, to make sure they could get to work, helping them buy cars, even though it was a hoop day, they were able to get to work. So we have to go forth and do those things. So similar issues, again, on smaller scales, but again, we have to deal with the lack of funds. And then because we're in northeastern North Carolina, we have to travel so far to get resources. And, sometimes we just had to do what we had to do in order to make things work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of resources, who would think that as you say, the richest country in the world, the capital, that there is one giant that serves 80,000 people, right? I mean, that is just unbelievable. Other ideas that you have, either that institutions or institutes such as ours, or just in general, I'm especially concerned about the special populations that may be hidden from view, right? The four of us can speak, right? But there are other people that don't necessarily speak. They tend to be the elderly, children, of course, as you said, vets, and certainly people who have mental health, challenges. What can we do collectively to reach out to them?
Well, I want to give a shout out to Christina for reaching out to Brooklyn Manor, which is a very changing, but it's right in our back door. And some of the services that's been provided through our relationship with Rodham Institute has been amazing. They're getting food several days a week, but is that sufficient? And all the other needs they have, and she's in touch with the program manager over there. So that was a godsend to get them connected.
Yeah.
And we look forward to working with them to do
Thank you. For those of you that don't know about Brooklyn Manor, it is in an ever-changing, gentrifying area. And the makeup of that building, a lot of seniors. Actually, Ms. Elliott is one of the senior activists. God bless her, she's 82 years old and a community activist, and has really given voice and has been for decades to the needs of that community. And so there are so many conflicting sort of interests, right, where sadly the people who've been there for all these decades kind of get left out. So what we've been trying to do is to really focus on a specific place where we can make a difference, right? Because when you develop those relationships, it's a lot more difficult to have one and done. It is about something continuous. We're trying to get computers and get free internet for the kids so that it's something holistic. It's not just one small thing and then you're out. And then I also want to let everybody know, does everybody know Taraji Henson, the famous actress?
Yes.
So I'm on her, what they call tribal council. You might know that her father, who was a Vietnam vet, actually struggled with mental health. And she herself has been very open about her mental health struggles. So almost 2 years ago now, she established the Henson Foundation. The Henson Foundation gives free mental health services to African Americans. So if you go on the website, it's free. And you know that that's very difficult to get free mental health services. And it's just an incredible organization. They have, you know, people that work with vets, with kids, with women, with men, different kinds of, and some of the people that are actually some of our partners are some of the mental health experts that work with them. So if there's anything that we can do to, you know, if there are areas that you find like, oh, we need a resource, we can just do we're matchmakers. We're very good at matchmaking, and we can point you in the right direction so that, you know, your congregants, your community members, whomever might be able to take advantage of these services. So in closing, I'm just going to sort of, you know, because we only have a few more minutes left, and I don't know if there are any, I don't think there are any comments right now from chat. But in closing, for each of you, how are we going to get through this? What does the other side look like?
We each one of us have a responsibility in this, a responsibility in terms of making sure we're doing all we can not to infect our families, not to infect others. So social distancing, as we all know, we can't say that enough. Certainly wearing your mask, we can't say that enough. Washing your hands. And if we're all singing from the same sheet of music, we can hopefully see the decline. It'll be gradual, but there'll be a decline. Um, we've got to start somewhere, and we've got to start with us and ensuring that we're not only sharing that message, but demonstrating that message too. I mean, I can't tell my grandchild to put on their mask if I'm not wearing one. So we've got to set the example, not just for children. As we all hear the news, we need to set it for adults as well. Fortunately, it comes at a cost to some, but you know, you continue. I think that's what our role is to our people. You continue to do the right thing. So it's going to be a minute more, but we can't stop now doing what we know from a health perspective.
That's right.
We know it's right.
Thank you. Miss Jerry?
My biggest concern is having people in the community take advantage of what's offered. You know, health care, health information is not a priority if you don't know where your meal is coming from. You don't know how you're going to buy your pills.
True.
So there's a tremendous gap. We can have all the lectures and take the food, but if you're still in a place where you're afraid to go to sleep, you can't walk the street, that is a tremendous divider of people taking advantage of the resources. And I wished I had an answer.
It's called eradicating poverty. That's, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
We're going to give you, Pastor, the last word. What are your closing remarks, please?
And I think Ms. Bell said we have to lead by example, and to go for we have to be visible and diligent as we continue to work together, to continue to come together like this, or get different things to show the community, hey, we are out there, we want to help you. Again, as far as, you know, with COVID-19, wear your mask, wash your hands, let it be seen, promote it within the church. One of the things that I'm working on now with the church is improving our multimedia, our web pages to get more information out. And as Israel, we're going to use our webpage, our website, again, to help with this type of program and making sure that the community is aware of everything that's going on. So we want to work together. Most of all, pray and pray and pray again that we all get through this, and knowing that I think it goes back to the song that was sung many years ago when all of the stars got together saying, "We are the world."
Yes,
we
sir.
are the world.
Yes,
And
we
we
are.
have to work as we are brothers and sisters in this world, trying to make this world a better day.
Well, I can't think of a better way to close this this Rodham Impact Speaker Series. I thank each and every one of you. I hope that we stay safe and healthy. And we are at your service at the Rodham Institute, and we'll have some offline conversations to figure out what we can do, not just a one and done, but to actually build programming.
Yes.
So thank you, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the
Bye-bye.
invitation. Good
Bye-bye.
night.